Hello, we're just doing one video tonight, but I want to do a history one, so, I'll put on a little music and then tell you about it a little bit, but this is going back to History Boomerang, which is my true love. This is some Native American music from the land of the Incas. Before Christopher Columbus discovered America, which he didn't, but that will be another story. There were three, I'm going to call them civilizations, big, huge Native American civilizations in North America, this piece of land. One was the Mayans or the Mayans, however you want to say it. Another was the Aztecs, and the last one probably was the first one, and that was in what today is South America. And those were the Incas, and so that's who I want to talk about. For I'm going to cut it off at 10 minutes. I don't want to be a whole long time on it, but if I had a map to show you, which I don't, so I'm not a very good history teacher down there. The Incas made their home. They came and made their home in around the Andes Mountains, and they had the best of three worlds with food. Most of the villages were actually in the mountains, but down the one side of the mountains, you had a coastal area. You had a small area, coastal area. So there you would have all your things from the ocean, your fish and, I don't know, whatever else they eat from down there. Whales, I don't know what all, but they had where in the heck does it say that? So, well, you had all your coastal stuff. Okay, and then, it said fish, and it says cotton and corn, so I guess they had some land down by the coast where they could put their corn and actually raise cotton. And then you had the big Andes Mountains. Let's say this is one chain of Andes Mountains, and this is the other one. And a lot of time, or they'd be together, and then many places they'd separate out a little bit, and right in the middle of your mountain slopes, right down here through where my head's going, that was a plain, P-L-A-I-N, where they could grow, graze animals, mostly llamas and alpacas, and that was their source of meat, also their source of, the fur not fur, but anyway, that's also where they produced any crops like potatoes, different things like that. And then let me show you one picture. In the pictures that you most often see, this was Emperor's Village. You see, they built cities up on hills and they terraced the land. See what those are terraced in? They just cut back the land, and then look, they planted grass, and then they grew crops up on the terraced land. So you really had the best of all three worlds with their food. It's interesting. I always tell kids we think of guinea pigs as pets. I had many guinea pigs when I was a kid, and I could tell a story about one guinea pig when I worked at G.C. Murphy's, but we don't have time right now. But to them, guinea pigs were meat food. That's where guinea pigs first came from. I don't know where they got them, but that's where they raised them for meat food, guinea pigs. In fact, when I taught school, I found a few old recipes for guinea pig that they had and shared a couple. That was bad, because I would never do that. But so anyway, they had this landscape that was just unreal. They had the coast, they had the mountains, they had the area between the mountains, which produced a plain where they could graze, and then they terraced in the mountains where they could grow crops. And if you go back, and if I go back through the whole history, I actually learned some stuff here that I wasn't privy to when I taught. But if I do that, we're going to be here an hour, and you don't want that. But so I'm just going to start with who was the emperor of the Incas when the Spanish conquistadors went down to attack. Sometimes the story that builds up to it is also fascinating. Of course, I'm going to make up a new word, emperorship. The leadership was passed down from family to family in that culture. I will tell you one thing before I get into it. I didn't know this. The leaders of the Inca were so sacred to the people that they believed they were set off from the rest of the world, and everything the emperor touched was collected and saved, and then at the end of 1 year, it was all burned. And that goes as far as the emperor spit. Okay, if the emperor had to spit, he would spit in one of his people's hands, a courier or whatever. He'd spit in their hands. They would wipe it off their hands, and then they, with a special cloth, and then they'd store that cloth, and then at the end of a year, then anything that the emperor had touched was burned in the ceremony. And I wish I'd known that, because it'd been fun to teach the kids that. So I'm just going to skip right to their main city, which I can't pronounce half the words, but it was spelled, I don't actually, Qosqo. Just a good Scrabble word, but it's a proper noun. That was their big main city. And right in the middle of the main city, they put a plaza. And that plaza has a name I can't pronounce it anyway, Kapata. But it was something else. A big plaza right in the middle. They brought white sand from the ocean. They covered the plaza floors, whatever. Not floors, but the bottom of the plaza was filled with white sand from the ocean. And then every day, it said an army of city workers would come out. They raked the sand every day to make it look beautiful. They would build the emperors, because they changed hands quite often, because sometimes people didn't live very long back then. They would put temples around the plaza, build the homes of emperors around the plaza. So it was more than just the center of their growing empire. They ran a road out of each side of the city. I thought I had a picture of it, but I don't think I do. So they ran one road east, one road west, one road north, one road south, and then I don't know how far they ran the road. I haven't studied that much. But that became the Inca Kingdom, and it all started in that plaza, in that main capital town that starts with Q. And then they call another big long name, which meant land of the four quarters, because that's how they determined their land. And for a long time, the emperor would actually take charge of the conquest of going out and taking over neighboring cities and Native American groups and adding to their kingdom. And then finally, they gave that off to somebody else. So I want to just start right on at the one thing where the conquistadors came. So that was, here's another. Before I do that, the blood of the emperor was so sacred, it said, that it had to, only someone really special could be a mate of the emperor to produce an heir. And the only people who do that was another royal Inca. Well, they're not in a big supply, and so the ruler before the guy I'm talking about, Thupa, Inca, he started the practice of having rulers marry their sisters. I know. But he had other wives as well. And it said by the time this dude died, he ruled the biggest empire. He had, from all his wives, biggest empire on earth, he had more than 60 sons. And then that set off a big fight between them, and it ended up a battle between a son named Washkar and then Atahualpa, I'm going to say. When I taught school, I called him something different, but I don't think I was saying his name right. He's the emperor I wanted to talk about, Atahualpa. Okay? At one brutal point, he and his brother went at it for control of the kingdom. His brother, Washka, actually captured Atahualpa, and one of his wives let him go, and then he ended up taking over his brother's army, and he even, it said, made a drinking cup from the skull of his brother's main general. And then when they finally captured his brother, for whatever reason, they executed all of his wives and children and left him. I don't know what they did with him, but made a big triumphant walk to get to the plaza, everything. So then, that was in the summer of 1532, and in the fall of 1532, these strange creatures were approaching the Inca Kingdom that were this pale, hairy people who sat on enormous animals had landed on the coast and were headed that way. And so, and that was the, in my opinion, one of the meanest conquistadors, Spanish conquistadors that you could get, and his name was Pizarro. His first name was Francisco. And he also had brothers, and they fought, and he had sons. But and he was an old guy. He's not that young, but he's mean. So anyway, they heard they were coming. There were 168 Spanish men led by a conquistador, and that was Pizarro, Francisco Pizarro. And when they got to town, to where their big square was, the Spanish, they persuaded Atahualpa to come and visit them, acting like they came in peace, all that good stuff. And so the Incas came in friendship, and all they had with them when they came, there were 5,000 to 6,000 of them, but all they brought were ceremonial weapons because they thought they were going to meet whoever these strange people were that were coming. And according to Francisco Pizarro's younger brother Pedro, Pizarro had cleverly hidden Spanish guns, Spanish horses, Spanish men in the buildings that surrounded the square I told you about a minute ago. So when Atahualpa, when he got there, a Spanish priest gave him a travel-stained prayer book, and it said, and what they wanted to do is they wanted to force the Native Americans, the Incas, to accept Christian religion, and then they didn't want to do that. And so Atahualpa took the prayer book and threw it. Well, that just gave the Spanish an excuse to everybody come out of their hiding places and attack, which they did. It said guns roared, horses charged out of the building, smoke and fire, and giant plunging animals, and the Incas had never seen anything like that before in their lives. I will show you one picture that we have right here. And that is the Emperor Atahualpa. So anyway, they've never seen animals like this. They've never seen people in big steel outfits that they can't get through. There was mass confusion. Hundreds of them were trampled to death when they tried to flee. And so the Spanish seized the advantage, killed most of the others, and it says that Pizarro himself was said to have captured Atahualpa. Now, here's the sad part. Well, yeah. Atahualpa, he had lots of gold in his kingdom, and he knew that these men, he could tell that they were very interested in that. So he offered a deal, Pizarro, Atahualpa offered a deal to Pizarro for his release. And the deal was, I will fill a large room with gold, and I will fill 2 large rooms with silver in exchange for my freedom. Zarzos said, oh, sure, let's do it. So Atahualpa ordered his generals to go back and strip the city because there were silver coating and gold coating on the buildings. There were all kinds of candle holders, statues, things you set out around made of pure silver and pure gold. So it said for months the road from the main city to where Atahualpa was being held prisoner, caravans of llamas carrying precious jewelry, sculptures, ornaments ripped from the buildings, and slowly the room started filling up with gold and silver. And it says by May of 1533 they were full. So, you know, the leader, he kept his part of the bargain. Now it's time for him to be released. Pizarro took all the pieces of artworks, all the things made of gold and silver, had them melted down into gold and silver bars, put them on donkeys. The donkeys got them to the ships, which were probably near where Panama is right now, and then they were taken to Spain. Well, a few went the other way because they knew there were English sea dogs out trying to steal them, but that's a whole other story. So he did that, and then instead of releasing Atahualpa, somebody kind of thought this was coming like he promised he'd do. He had him strangled to death, and then hung out in the main square for all the other Incas to see. And then the conquistador very easily seized the capital. And one thing we probably don't realize when we teach kids, it probably as big as the Inca. So a small group of 168 or something Spanish people took over the largest civilization in the world. But to take the whole entire thing over, it was another 40 years because they had to spread out to where the 4 roads created the kingdom. But that was very easy to do when you take the smallpox that they brought with them and venereal diseases, the syphilis and gonorrhea, and the advantage of horses and steel. It wasn't too awful hard to do. So anyway, and that's what brought down the Inca Kingdom. And it's really, I promised I'd get this. I certainly didn't make it in 10. And then the other thing he lied about. So, okay, first he takes Atahualpa out in the middle of the square, and he ties him to a post, and he begins to light a fire at the bottom and burn him up. Well, that's a big fear of the Incas. And so he begged him, and what he even said, Pizarro said, as he's getting ready to light the wood under him, you accept Christianity and God, say you accept that, and we won't set this fire to kill you. Atahualpa once again said, okay, I accept Christianity, God, and all that stuff. So he kept his end of the bargain. Pizarro did. He didn't burn him. Instead, he had him strangled right there in front of everybody. Remember, the deal was, I won't start the wood and burn you. So Pizarro was probably one of the really worst of the Spanish conquest. There weren't any that were exactly somebody you'd like to have over for dinner sometime. And that's how he took it over. And the last thing is kind of interesting. I'll tell you why I turned this music on, because I don't want it takes forever to load these long ones. Mummies, they kept the mummies of the dead rulers. They thought they were still living, so they brought them out, they set them in chairs, they had them and keep the flies off of them and all that, and put all the stuff with them, and then you could not take the palace of somebody that would have been an emperor, Inca emperor. So they're sort of running out of houses for the emperors that came, but it didn't really matter because see you later, the lovely Spanish conquistadors took care of all that. See ya.